Thanks for joining us at the Clive Barker Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the works and worlds of Clive Barker. This is episode 146, A to Z and the Duels of Blood Part 8. Our final episode of the series. We go over letters W, X, Y, and Z, and the bonus round of the Duels of Blood over at www.duelsofblood.com. All this plus Clive Barker news, Hellraiser Judgment Rumor, and what's coming up next for those of you that like to prepare. Feel free to join us in the conversation in comments or leave us a voicemail over at www.clivebarkercast.com. And of course, this episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination shop is dedicated to benefiting the Arts and Medicine program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. Up to 50% of the proceeds will support the program, where artist Don Bertram volunteers monthly. Please join us in donating to the program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's a link in the show notes and on the main website at clivebarkercast.com that will take you where you need to go to get one of his prints or art book and help this wonderful program. Any friend of Clive Barker's is a friend of ours, and we thank him for his support. Okay, well, here we are. It's episode 146, A to Z of Horror and the Duels of Blood. The final part. This is letters W, X, Y, and Z. And today I'm Ryan, and...
Hi, I'm Joe. Hi.
Exactly. And we did have David with us last time, but this time he wasn't able to make it.
David Sharp.
Yeah. One kind of interesting thing that when I was editing our last episode that I kind of noticed there when we were talking about Rosemary's Baby, and he mentioned how the soundtrack, he thought it was really neat how the soundtrack uses the clock. They use the clock as a soundtrack.
Sure.
And then there was just, from the two of us, there was just silence, and I was kind of hoping he didn't take that like, crickets. For me, I was just stopping and rewinding the movie in my head and thinking, oh yeah, they did do that. I didn't even occur to me, but we didn't really talk about it. I think we were both probably just thinking about what he said.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what I was going to say next. So sorry about that. Yeah, it was a Bernard Herrmann's score, I believe, for that movie. So I never really heard the score just by itself. But I thought it served the movie very well in terms of marking, the dream sequences and all that stuff. So anyway.
Sometimes that opening theme song from Rosemary's Baby gets put on Halloween compilation CDs.
Oh, really?
Like those little bargain bin ones that you find like at Walmart and stuff. That one that goes la 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 la.
Yeah, the Halloween spooky party sounds, that we've all been to a party with that stuff playing in the background.
Exactly, and the Monster Mash.
Yeah, and that fake cobwebs stretched out along the walls.
Right. Yeah.
I hate touching that stuff. It gives me chills down my spine. Yeah, I don't like to touch like fluffy cotton or something. I can always imagine that stuff getting caught in a snag or like my nails and just having to rip it out. It's just, I just get all goosebumpy about it.
I get that way with nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
Or there was something Joey was doing today with he was like, hey Dad, can you do this? And he was slurping the applesauce out of his spoon, and it just creep me out. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's bad etiquette as well. But
yes. Right. But
anyway,
everything for him is kind of new, so.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
But speaking of new, I just had to just want to say this little note that today I had to give up my two little kittens that I'd been fostering. So they were given to a PetSmart in Arizona in Chandler. So just in case anybody any Arizonians out there who want to adopt two wonderful kitties. They're Phobos and Demos, and they're at the PetSmart in Ocotillo.
They're the little orange kittens.
Orange kittens, that's right. Yeah.
You should recognize them if you've been following Jose's Facebook post.
Yeah.
Are they also on Instagram?
They are on Instagram, yes. I can put that on the show notes if that's okay. But
sure. Yeah, they're stars.
Yeah, they're little stars. Anyway, so that was my morning, and then I finished doing some notes for this episode, so I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, in Clive Barker news, the first one we wanted to talk about is Hellraiser Anthology Volume 2, which is really neat. We were hoping that there would be a Volume 2. I think we had done a story where we mistakenly believed that they were going to be ready by July, but it turns out they're going to be released in September.
That's right. Anthology 2 volume will be released in September, debuting at Son of Monsterpalooza in Burbank. So it'll be available a week after the Monsterpalooza convention on the realclivebarker.com store, both as a hardcover graphic novel and a digital download. So if you're familiar with the first volume, the first anthology, the hardcover will be signed and all that stuff, but then once it runs out, they will release a paperback. And I don't think the hardcover is coming back anytime soon.
And another neat thing about it that they hadn't, that's kind of, you have to kind of piece together from seeing different people's posts about it from the artists. And Nicholas Vince had sort of hinted, hey, look, my story is getting illustrated by Clive Barker. And it's like, whoa. So Nicholas Vince wrote a story that was illustrated by Clive Barker, and then later on we found out that it was the origin of Chatterer. Is that the story that's called Look-See? I wonder if it is. I wonder if they made a comic adaptation of Look-See.
Did Nicholas Vince mention the title of the story?
No, he didn't. He only said that Clive Barker was illustrating his story, and it said like written by So he shared like just the cover page that said written by Nicholas Vince and illustrated by Clive Barker, and he's like, I can't believe this. And then other people posted that they were doing the origin story of Chatterer. So I wonder.
Okay, well, I was just sorry. I just read back, and I found out that Nicholas Vince said, I'm beyond excited to finally share a story I drafted in December of 2012. Oh. So the story is it's called Prayers of Desire. So he says it's worth the wait as it's found its spiritual home besides wonderful illustrations by Clive and among superb storytellers. So I guess it's not Look-See, even though that's a pretty cool story that also depicts the origins of Chatterer as a comedian. I wonder, I just made the assumption that story that he was doing was the origin of Chatterer, but someone else could have done the origin of Chatterer. Right. And maybe it wasn't this one. Right. So it's going to be Prayers of Desire. So let's see. And this alternate take on the Chatterer's origin, let's see what Nicholas Vince comes up with, because he's been a really cool author with his previous books of short stories. So I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. We'll have to. I can't wait until this comes out. Yeah. And speaking of Hellraiser Anthology, the trade paperback of Volume 1 is going to be available at the Real Clive Barker store on July 4th weekend. So that's excellent. Everybody that missed the hardcover and is not really excited about an ebook, there's still a trade paperback that will go available, and I don't think it's limited. I don't know what... I mean, everything's limited, to a point, but there should be plenty of copies. It's good for people who missed on the hardcover. That's always a useful thing. And so that was announced by Ben Mears, who's editing the anthology. And so he says, yep, all the stories, everything in the hardback, much cheaper than the hardback version. And everything is in there. The only difference is it's a floppy cover. Yeah, right. Yeah, so I really like the hardcover, but I would be totally happy with a trade paperback. It's probably the same size, I would imagine. I mean, the same dimensions and everything. Yeah, the standard comic size. Yeah. And then Cavity Colors. It's come back again. These ones that they said would be available in the spring. Now they've got a release date, July 29th, for their Nightbreed collection of T-shirts. I went to Cavity Colors, and back in the June 27, they posted a news saying this Thursday, June 29th, says, join us as we celebrate the Clive Barker Classic Nightbreed. So they're launching a officially licensed collection. And, yep, so... so as we're recording this, it's today? Yeah, they announced it and says, coming Thursday, June 29th at 5 p.m. EST. Oh. So they got the capsule collection. They have some really great designs here. I see I added another one to the show notes there that you can probably look at. There's the Nightbreed version 1. It's art by Francesco Francavilla. So you'll have T-shirts and tank tops, and then you'll have a baseball tees with an amazing design featuring all the major characters like Peliquin, Decker, Kinski, Laurie, Boone, everybody, Lylesburg. And that's art by Devin Whitehead. So you'll have T-shirts and baseball tees. And then they'll have a 5-pin collector's set, which, wow. I mean, I was into pins when I was a teenager. I used to collect a bunch of pins and all my favorite bands and stuff. And these look to be really pretty cool. Die-cast metal pins, I think.
Yeah.
So it says here, limited edition of 1,000 sets worldwide, 500 for the first pressing. So the pins are $30. And they have something which I think is really cool. If you're still like a vinyl enthusiast and you have your own LP player, you can get a Nightbreed turntable slip mat. Just pretty amazing. Again, art by Devin Whitehead, and it'll be a limited edition of 200.
You can watch Boone and Decker spin around on your turntable.
Yeah. You can see. Actually, the hole for the turntable thing, it fits right in the middle of the gates of Midian. So
yeah, and there's kind of a red spiral going around that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Especially if you play one of those fancy re-releases that has the colored vinyl.
I like this artwork, too. I've never seen this. This must be original for these shirts, right?
Yeah, this must be custom-made for this.
Yeah, pretty neat. Well, and so this is a little strange one, but you had pointed this out to me a little while ago, that Tom Holland's Terror Time has got some space on the Real Clive Barker store. So there you can buy some different kind of various things. They have, I saw some autographed Blu-rays of like Fright Night and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and The Howling, signed by Tom Holland and Toby Hooper and Joe Dante. And
yeah, that's really cool. It actually kind of reminds me of this series that we're doing now with the A through Z of horror, because all these people have been interviewed for the book, right? Back in the 90s.
True.
Yeah. So you got some Fright Night T-shirts, Child's Play, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is a really crazy movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's pretty wild. It's got Dennis Hopper in there. You have The Beast Within and The Howling. I guess they're diversifying a little bit on the Clive Barker store.
Yeah. I wonder how many of these are available. It's interesting, though.
Well, that when they're gone, they're gone. So if you want to order them, I think this is the time.
And as we're recording this just happened today. Paul Taylor, who you'll probably recognize the name as he's playing Pinhead in the presumably upcoming movie Hellraiser Judgment. He put a little post on Facebook saying, wouldn't it be great if Dimension actually did some publicity for a new Hellraiser movie? And lots of people commented, and it was interesting. I think a majority of people didn't realize who it was, because they just commented like, yeah, stupid,
Dimension.
Screwing up the franchise as usual. And
right.
But so I went on there and I had asked him, do you have any idea when this is coming out? And he said there's a rumor that it will be September 10th, the exact day, 30-year anniversary of the first film. Seems like a perfect idea to me.
Okay, so
I don't know. I mean, that sounds cool, but that doesn't sound like something that he would be aware of, that the Weinsteins would be aware of or would even care about.
Sure. I still have my reservations about Hellraiser Judgment, but I guess he changed his name on Facebook. He used to be Paul T. Taylor. Now he's just Paul Taylor. Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, I thought that's what I had remembered too. And then I asked him, "Hey, have you seen a trailer?" And he said, "Brian, I saw an unofficial in-house trailer several months ago that the casting director showed me. I squealed and made him show it to me several times. I am a monster, but alas, he was forbidden from sharing it beyond that. But I can tell you it was beautiful." So isn't that strange? Why, if they have this, why don't they just use it? I mean, how hard is it to put that thing on YouTube?
Who knows? I mean, maybe they're just trying to make sure that stuff doesn't leak out before they can do whatever they want to do in terms of marketing, which I'm sure will be very, very little about this movie. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you think this is kind of a deliberate attempt at like kind of not bury the movie, but be like, okay, let's promote it as less as possible. It's just a contractual sequel. Let's see. Yeah. You know, we don't want to spoil the franchise too much if it's a stinker. I don't know. This is just my impression.
Yeah, like sometimes a trailer can just destroy a movie before it ever gets a chance to sell. Or
oh, right. Yeah. Just look at that Ghostbusters reboot. That went down in history as the most hated trailer on YouTube, and it just became like, in a way, it gave him a lot of publicity. I'm just not sure it was the right one. Right.
I don't know. I mean, I hate when people say I'm cautiously optimistic, because when you think about that, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's like it's like you have 50% chance of rain. You know, it's like anybody could say that. But
well, I'll take all these comments from Paul Taylor with a grain of salt, because he's the guy who has invested the most in this, apart from the director and the producers. He's the guy who wants to take over the mantle as Pinhead. So obviously he's always going to say the movie is good, it's great, it's beautiful. It's a mixture between Fellini and this and that, like he said once. And I'm like, I find that really hard to believe, but we'll see.
I think, his enthusiasm is infectious. And, you know, when I start feeling down about it, I think about how excited he is for the movie. And then I think, well, you know, now I kind of want to see it. And
sure.
It was for a while feeling like just an obligation, you know, for our podcast that we have to watch this movie. But, you know, I if they're trying something different, I don't know. I mean, I want to give it a shot.
We'll have our say when we do the audio commentary for Hellraiser Judgment. Yeah. But in the meantime, just to recap, so he said that the rumor is that it will be September 10th, the exact to the day, 30-year anniversary of the film. Yeah. So clock is ticking. Let's see. Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's too bad. I don't know. I mean, it would be nice if we could see a trailer, but maybe they're afraid of people judging it for too long before the movie actually airs. Or
I don't know when they're trying to release the trailer, because we're in July already. And if this is gonna premiere in September 10, there's 2 months until it premieres. So
yeah, that's not that long.
It's not that long, right? Yeah. I've seen trailers for movies months before they're meant to premiere. So I don't think they're using the trailer as sort of like a buzz generator. I mean, it seems like really they're trying to just make it as inconspicuous as possible.
They want to throw it out on the market so people will go, oh, there's a new Hellraiser movie, and then they'll buy it without knowing anything about it.
Right. Yeah. So they can catch some of that, surprise kind of thing that if it's bad, and at least people will just buy it without knowing, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, it wasn't that good.
What was do you remember the budget for this movie?
Oh, jeez.
I know it was higher than Revelations, but I can't remember. It was like $250,000.
200,000, 250,000. It was something about a six-figure digit like that. Yeah. And the low six-figure digits.
I think, which is like double what they did for Revelations.
I'll bet. Yeah, that movie seemed like it was recorded in a weekend.
Yeah, God, it was horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so moving on to the Duels of Blood, we had our bonus round. This is weird. I think there's some kind of Mendelssohn Shape fan out there that's been single-handedly doing this.
I guess people they forgot that there was going to be a bonus round or something, because Mendelssohn Shape won against Julia 95% of the votes, so he got it. This had very low turnout. I think people just forgot that there was going to be a bonus round. So they got 113 votes for Mendelssohn Shape versus 6 votes for poor Julia.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
I know. I wonder also if we stuck more to like Nightbreed and Hellraiser. Like our first year, we had Nightbreed category and Hellraiser category, and people were really excited. But this year, it's with all the literary characters. I wonder if we had some hardcore fans, but we lost a lot of the more casual.
Well, there's always the law of diminishing returns, and this is a sequel, so
right.
I guess the big hitters are out, so I guess people didn't didn't really get so much interest in this. But, hey, it was fun. It was so this time Mendelssohn Shape won against Julia, and Mendelssohn Shape won the second volume of the Duels of Blood.
Yep. So he is not only the 2017 champion, but he's also the champion overall until next year.
That's right. Yeah. So next year we'll have to come up with more characters and maybe throw in a few repeats and see what happens.
Yeah. This was a little surprising, but I kind of wonder because you can vote every 5 minutes. So if there's somebody out there that just loves Mendelssohn Shape, which seems like that might have happened.
Well, and, there's also another thing that I think we're doing, which is we're starting to try to expand our podcast a little more. So we're trying to figure out more stuff about search engine optimization and how to show up in results and stuff like that that we were talking about the other day. And now with Marcus and David joining us as contributors and occasional, co-hosts, we're ready. We're ready to start rolling out a little more, try to find more niches out there on the internet that we can promote the podcast to. And I think that was also something that kind of failed in Duels of Blood this year was probably since it was a sequel, since, it wasn't as promoted as the one last year. I think people didn't really the total sum of Clive Barker fans were a little they didn't see this. They didn't see this that much. So, it's so that's something that we should work on for next year.
And we didn't have Max and Pyramid Gallery promoting it either because because that last year we had the whole Hellraiser category, which was kind of made Max a natural for joining us. But this year it was more the literary characters and stuff.
Absolutely. The help of Max and the Pyramid Gallery was pretty instrumental last year because he has a lot of following. He has a lot of people who visit his website and buy his boxes. So that helped a lot as well.
So we'd like your feedback out there. What would you like to see in the Duels of Blood? What what would make it more fun or what would make it better? We're totally open to ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Mendelssohn Shape had 95% of the votes and Julia only 5.
Hey, Julia's only human. Mendelssohn Shape is an interdimensional magic assassin working for, the nighttime. I forgot his name.
Yeah, Christopher Carrion.
Christopher Carrion.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
The Lord of Midnight.
God, I had to wake up really early today because take care of the kittens and show up at 8 in.the.morning to meet with the person that was going to take them. So I failed there. So thanks.
So next we've got we're going to be talking about our main topic here, Clive Barker's A to Z of horror, and so this was our final Duels of Blood round. This is also our final episode on Clive Barker's A to Z of horror. I'm going to kind of miss it.
Yeah, it was a great run. I learned a lot about horror and a lot of stuff, references that Clive had in this book that kind of got me into a lot of cool stuff. Really,
yeah. I hadn't read this since I was in college in '96. When it came out, that was the last time I had read this book.
I only bought this book years after we started this podcast, so I've had it for maybe 3 years, 2 years.
I think you and I were the opposite on that because I'd never seen the TV series, and you'd probably seen the TV series but hadn't read the book until.
That's right. Yeah.
But and the TV series and versus the book are a little weird on this one because in the TV show there's no Y, there's no letter Y. And the crow was in N for Never Again in the TV series, but in the book N is for Nightmare, which is about Nightmare on Elm Street. So in the book they put the crow in with the zombie section. Z is for zombies.
Right. And we already talked about the crow doing this series before, right?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we didn't watch it for that, but I watched it this time around.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
The Blu-ray?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. I actually have a couple of work prints of the movie.
Really?
I have to watch them again. Yeah, a little longer, a little different from each other. But there's a work print A and a work print B, And I also found, like, a long time ago, I found this video floating around the internet. It was supposed to be David J. Shaw's, the scriptwriter, personal video log on set. And in it, you could actually see them shooting scenes with the Skull Cowboy that was played by Michael Berryman. It was supposed to be a character that would appear throughout the movie, and it was totally cut from the movie. That character was totally cut.
So was that a character that was from the land of the dead to just kind of remind him that he was dead?
Yes. He was a guy with a skull-like face and a cowboy hat and like a big trench coat, kind of thing. It is a guide in the land of the living for all the poor souls like Eric that found themselves in a limbo. So he was supposed to be mostly a bystander, but he would show up. I think his big scene would be before the crow enters the church when he's going to save Sarah.
Yeah.
He was supposed to show up. Right. Before that, he was supposed to find the skull cowboy, and he was supposed to tell him not to go save Sarah. So, yeah. I don't know why.
The skull cowboy is just like, no, forget her. Just go back to the land of the dead.
Right. So yeah, that was interesting to see. Yeah.
Do you think they would have killed her if he left?
I don't know.
I don't know that they'd have any reason to, except that they were really sadistic.
I didn't get a chance to read the script, so in my research, though, I did find something interesting. That Rob Zombie actually wrote a script for a remake of The Crow.
Oh.
Yes, it was called. It was called. Let me just find my notes here. Here it is. The Crow 2037. That would be the title of the movie, and the tagline would be, and get ready for this, a new world of gods and monsters. So I'll add it to the show notes. It's 107 pages. I didn't read it so far. I just skimmed through it a little bit. And it was a draft that was dated from July 24th, 1997. He wrote this for the Edward R. Pressman Film Corporation. And it's pretty wild. There's like a crazy priest that kills a mother and son, and then the son is brought back as an assassin. And then we jump to the future where there's like monsters everywhere, and he's kind of a monster bounty hunter. And he doesn't remember anything that happened to him or his mother, and until he's eaten by a giant monster, and then that's where the memories come in, I think.
Whoa!
So yes, it would have been really, really weird. Allegedly, Rob Zombie actually rewrote this script and titled it Black Rider X, but it was never produced.
Wow, that doesn't sound like something he would do.
Yeah, well, hey, when money's involved, it's like, sure, I'll write a script.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, his movies seem to all be about, like, murderous hillbillies and stuff.
Yeah. So this, I guess it would be more like that cartoon that he made, LX or Super Beasto or something.
Oh, yeah. I've never seen that.
It's fun. It's a funny cartoon.
Well, we started out with W for Window, which in the TV series didn't really talk about Edgar Allan Poe much at all, but in the book there was a good half of it was about Edgar Allan Poe before it moved on to this photographer Simon Marsden. Right.
I thought that was an interesting connection that they were doing because apparently Simon Marsden was a big Edgar Allan Poe fan, and then when he was 21, his father gave him a camera, and that's when he started taking more pictures and got more interested in architectural photography and stuff like that. So,
of like old decayed buildings and castles and things like that, right?
Yeah. So he has a couple of books that the main ones are the Once Great Houses of Ireland in Ruins. Mm-hmm. So that's one, and then there was another one called The Haunted Realm, Ghosts, Witches, and Other Strange Tales, and Visions of Poe. So, because Poe is kind of like the father of the Gothic tradition, right?
Yeah. I kind of see the connection, but it's probably just more that this photographer said that he was inspired by him, because I don't think if without him saying that or without the book saying that, would we have really put those two together?
Well, I didn't really read any of his books or anything. Yeah. But
just from what we know in this, I don't know, from what we've seen in this.
Well, there's several stories like the fall of the House of Usher that always take place in this like big estate house, big family house, big Gothic,
or Mask of the Red Death, and
Mask of the Red Death, or the Tomb of Ligeia, or they all take place in these like old crumbling places usually with a crypt or a cemetery or a raven that flies through a window. Nevermore.
Yeah, right.
But one of the things that he did that was really interesting was he used a lot of infrared photography to give his art kind of like a glowy look, like a ghostly kind of look. So I think it works really well. In infrared photography, the film that they use is sensitive to infrared light, but they use the spectrum at the near infrared to distinguish from the far infrared, which is the thermal imaging. So that's when you see the predator vision.
Right, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So and he took a lot of pictures of old crumbling buildings like that, like palaces in France, and places in the United Kingdom, and a great place. I mean, I just found out about this guy when I was reading this book for the first time, and unfortunately, he passed away in 2012.
Yeah, I saw in your notes that. I had no idea that he had died. That's pretty sad. Did he have a website or anything, or was all just in his books?
No, he has a website that you can visit. It's called marsedenarchive.com, and really recommend it because you can see hundreds of pictures there, and it's a beautiful place that we're going to put on the show notes. That is very cool. Yeah. So you click there, you go in the website, and you can see the picture library, and you can browse it by category. And the categories are very, very interesting. There's a bunch of them, of course, but there's like arcane arches and decorative doorways. I like the alliteration going on here. Bizarre interiors,
cadavers and skulls.
Yeah, and you even have one for Dracula's Transylvania.
That is cool.
Yep. Yeah, that is very nice. You can even buy archive print sales of his pictures. And so fascinating work, really fascinating stuff. And of course, they married it to Edgar Allan Poe because he was a big fan of Poe. He wrote a book called Visions of Poe. And then they go a lot into the biography of Edgar Allan Poe, which I'm a big fan of. So I didn't have to prepare because I know a lot about Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've read all his works, and when at a young age, I mean, we've all read the
Raven.
The Raven, of course. If nothing else, then the first Treehouse of Horror from The Simpsons has the whole poem of the Raven, right?
Yeah.
Where Bart plays the Raven and Homer plays Edgar Allan Poe, and that's a fascinating adaptation, read by the guy who does the voice of Darth Vader.
yeah, James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones, yeah.
Yeah.
So
that was good. We they showed that in high school when in my creative writing class they showed us that for when we talked about Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Although another big already, one, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, another big one is the Murders in the Rue Morgue, which spawned a sequel written by Clive Barker, kind of a sequel in the Books of Blood, right? The new Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Yeah.
Where a guy discovers that there's someone who shaved a monkey that's killing people and stuff. And then the monkey wants to be human.
Yeah.
Which, of course, Clive would do something like that. But I just bought this Chancellor Press edition of the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe with all the poems and stories, and I just read all that stuff.
I did.
And there's something that's not very well known, though, that I don't think a lot of people have read, is that Poe once did an essay called Eureka, which it's not very well known, I think, but it's a kind of a treatise in cosmology. It began as a scientific lecture that Poe would do to make money, and it's a fascinating essay that you can read, and I'll put a link to it on the show notes, because it's a kind of a long read, but it's very, very poetic. At the same time, it's all about science and Poe's ideas about cosmology. So fascinating stuff. Yeah.
If I read that, it was a long time ago, and I don't remember it anymore. I remember reading all of that whole book, but some of that stuff I zoned out on, like Tamerlane. I didn't like that poem at all.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I love the short stories, especially like Mask of the Red Death and the Telltale Heart, and what is the one where he walls in that person? I can't remember.
Where he what?
It's about walling in that woman into.
Oh yeah, the Cask of Amontillado.
Yes, there we go, and that one, and I think the Telltale Heart is a pretty famous one too.
The Telltale Heart, yeah. And back in the late 90s, I believe, there was this interesting CD that came out, a double CD called Closed on Account of Rabies. And it was, the title relates to this idea that one guy was doing some sort of research, and he came across these like test cases that were given to people to diagnose. And one of the old test cases that he found was about an anonymous guy who had all the symptoms of rabies, and then he discovered that guy might have been Edgar Allan Poe when he died in Baltimore.
Oh, wow.
And so now the diagnosis for that patient was possibly rabies. So a lot of people have this idea of Edgar Allan Poe being this guy who drank himself to death, and but some people even say that he might have had a problem where he, might have had a lesion in his brain, or he might have had an allergy to alcohol, actually. That the little bit could just send him in a bender and, complete out of control. Or he might have actually died from rabies.
Jeez.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, poor guy. He had a pretty terrible life.
Yeah, some people like to talk about the fact that he married his 13-year-old cousin. Yeah. But really, that was not a sexual relationship at all. They called each other brother and sister, really. So that was very, very. It was more so he could, take care of her and her mother, which he was very fond of. So, but definitely, he created this whole tradition, about looking at the world through the lens of Edgar Allan Poe is a very scary, very very old world full of dangers that you can be buried alive, or that you can be a victim of forces beyond your control.
Yeah. A
lot of melancholy as well in Poe stories.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and he never made any money off of them at all.
Right. He had a lot of depression, and even tried killing himself. But yeah, he was born in Boston to parents who were itinerary actors, and he was adopted later, and he was expelled from the University of Virginia. He was kind of a troublemaker. He really was a troublemaker.
Yeah. Well, and so our next letter is X for exploitation. This one isn't really exactly my wheelhouse. I mean, I appreciate these movies and stuff, these old 50s and 60s monster movies, but we weren't alive back then, so. Yeah,
I guess you can see these movies on TV. Like back when we were kids, you would see these movies on late night TV.
Yeah.
And if you were lucky, or should I say unlucky, I don't know. It depends on whether you like them or not. But exploitation was always a way of getting butts in seats in theater. Right? That's like, hey, part of also a little bit of that tradition of the Grand Guignol, if you come up with something really gross and shocking and titillating in some ways, then people will want to see it. And that's basically why people rubberneck during accidents on the road, and they just want to see, is there a dead guy there? Is there some blood?
Yeah. It was also really interesting to see and hear how the theaters felt threatened, by the advent of television. And it's kind of like things haven't really changed that much because, people can stream movies on their phone or, illegally upload them to YouTube, and the theaters are feeling threatened by that stuff. And it seems it was just really interesting to read, like, way back then that, people aren't going to buy tickets anymore, and that's been going on for 60 years.
Right, and you still hear about certain movies being, the most profitable movie ever made. It broke like $1 billion or whatever, and you still get these things being broken every year, even though they say that the theaters are dying. And I guess in a certain way they might be, but that just means that the the field of profit is becoming narrower and narrower to these big blockbuster productions.
Yeah. Well, and now instead of sitting on a joy buzzer on your seat, now you have like 3D goggles and an IMAX screen that's a couple of feet bigger than the regular screen.
Sure. And instead of being put in drive-ins and dollar theaters, some of these movies end up in Redbox and Netflix.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's plenty of movies about ghost investigators and stuff like that, you know. Horrible movies made like about Sasquatch or, you know, Bigfoot. Really terrible stuff I've seen. I mean, God, some of them are really stupid. Like, you know, probably done on like maybe $10,000 budget or less.
Yeah.
They end up on Netflix and, you know, they make money, hopefully for the director. But back in the 50s and 60s, you know, you have Joe Dante talking about this in the episode. You're talking about movies like The Crawling Eye and other movies that, for example, William Castle, that we're going to get into here, who made movies like Straight Jacket. What was another movie? The Old Dark House, Mr. Sardonicus, 13 Ghosts, The Tingler, House on Haunted Hill. He even produced Rosemary's Baby that we talked about on the other episode. Mm-hmm. So William Castle, a big time guy in exploitation movies. Yeah,
and he came up with a lot of gimmicks to get people into theaters. Like they would tour the movies around and hire people to like drop skeletons on them from above. And the people who had been to the movie more than once knew it was coming and would just start beating the crap out of the skeleton, so it'd be no good anymore the next time.
Or shooting pellet guns at the guy dressed as the monster or something.
Yeah, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, I had to pull a lot of pellets out of my body." Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
So this chapter talks a lot about exploitation, and there's some really funny titles here. One of them is actually an MST3K episode. It's called The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies. Yeah. That might be the longest title I've ever seen for a movie.
Do they, on Mystery Science Theater, do they pick some of these really old movies because they don't have to worry about rights anymore? Like
right.
Public domain?
Yeah, most of them were. Some of them weren't, and that's what's causing like Shout Factory to not be able to negotiate some rights to release all the episodes of MST3K. Yeah, there used to be a Harris, and she owned a bunch of library of movies, really old stuff, but she still holds on to that copyright and doesn't let it expire. Oh. And I don't know the details of it. I just know I read about this a long time ago. But yeah, there's some of them are not in the public domain, but obviously public domain movies are always like fair game, right? I mean, and they're cheap to get, and they're easy to put on YouTube, and you don't have to worry about any problems like Night of the Living Dead, who ends up becoming a public domain movie because they forgot to the studio forgot to file like a copyright notice or something.
Well, and after that happened, there were two more. People made just two more remakes of Night of the Living Dead with no input or anything from the original creators. Yeah.
But these movies have a certain charm to them, you know, the rubber monster or they have a picture here of a monster on page 220. It's called the She Creature, and it's just a hilarious monster. It's completely like made out of foam rubber, but at the same time, you have to admire a little bit the craft and artistry that went into making something like this.
Yeah.
Even if they would just, recycle these monsters sometimes. It says here that they used this monster for the She Creature, but then they reused it for another movie, and they just slapped a horrible wig on it.
Yeah.
And that's how they did it. You know, they just wanted to get butts in seats and drive-in theaters for teenagers who were horny and wanted to be in the back seat making out. Yeah. Basically, that's how Roger Corman became such a successful director. He was, working for American International Pictures. He's like, yeah, I can make some cheap movies for you guys. You know, we'll just make a production company and start cranking them out. So,
yeah,
exploitation's always been low budget, very poor stories, but at the same time, they're kind of fun. And they made them more fun when they came up with all these gimmicks of installing buzzers under seats or flying a skeleton through the audience or giving them some sort of gimmick. Like recently I saw the TV show Feud that talks about how Joan Crawford and Bette Davis made Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Mm-hmm. And near the end of that show, it shows a little bit more of the decline of Joan Crawford's career when she went to work for William Castle, and she made a movie called Straight Jacket. And they talk about that here. They have at least a poster in this book, A to Z of Horror. And and they had gimmicks for everything. You know, they pretended like William Castle went behind the screen, and then Joan Crawford would go behind the screen on the other side, and they would light up a light behind the screen, and then they would show like these shadows of Joan Crawford raising an axe, bringing it down on William Castle, and then someone would throw a rubber head out of the back of that screen, you know, and they would give out little cardboard cutouts of an axe to the audience members after watching the movie. Something that Joan Crawford didn't like at all. She was like, This is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, right.
But at that time, she wasn't getting any roles, so she was taking what she could. Yep. They have also here on page 222, Michael Landon, I Was a Teenage Werewolf,
right?
I think.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, like maybe, 30 years later he'd be playing an angel on Highway to Heaven.
Yes, right. I remember that show
right?
a lot more.
Oh my God, my parents loved that show. It was so painful to watch.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. You know, you just see the guy walking down the road, and it's like, oh God, Michael Landon as an angel. Okay, yeah. Whatever. But yeah, these gimmicks were cool. Like 13 Ghosts, right? There was like some weird vision thing that they would give people, like these blue and red squares of cellophane that they could put in front of their eyes. So when the ghost showed up, they could see the ghosts more clearly, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
There were all these things that they would do. You know, 3D was a gimmick too. I mean,
yeah.
The Monster in the Black Lagoon was a 3D movie.
It still is a gimmick. I mean, even this new 3D. Although I think it's sort of faded. It doesn't seem that important to people anymore to see the 3D version of a movie.
Yeah, and you know what? I was reading an article the other day that said that Avatar 2 is going to not require glasses at all to see in 3D. And I don't know how they're going to do it.
Wow. That's weird. Well, and some people choose not to do 3D because it gives them a headache or whatever. It's kind of nice to have the choice.
Right. I mean, you play a lot of Nintendo 3DS, right?
Yeah, I turn that off.
But there is a 3D option that doesn't require any sort of glasses, right?
Yeah, but it's on a slider, kind of like how, you know, when you're looking at like this holograms on a piece of paper or whatever, you have to look at it at just the right angle.
Yeah.
So the 3DS has a little slider where you adjust the depth of the 3D until it looks good at whatever angle you're looking at it.
Oh, okay. I never had a 3DS, so I never was able to experience it. But I knew that they have that technology.
And I slide it all the way down and turn it off all the time. And Joey has a 3DS, and I make sure his is off because I've heard that, you know, for really small kids, it's bad for their eyes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, going back to William Castle, I mean, he was a high school dropout. He was a man. He was totally a mover. You know, he was a high school dropout, but he started working for Columbia Pictures. You know, made a lot of low budget B movies. He was a producer of Rosemary's Baby, like I mentioned. And this all started, I think, when he saw Dracula, the play that had Lugosi playing it before the movie, because Dracula was a play before it was a movie. So he met Lugosi at 13. Dropped out of high school at 15, became an assistant stage manager for the road company of Dracula. And then he ended up working in Broadway, you know, and he did some really weird, smart stuff. Like he called Orson Welles once and leased a theater in Connecticut. And then he pulled this stunt. He was trying to make this play, and he ended up there was a German actress that he wanted. And so he wanted to hire her, but German-born actors in Germany, I think they could only do plays that had premiered in Germany first. So he came up with this play. He came up with this play in like a weekend called Not for Kids, Nicht für Kinder, and then he translated it to German. And when Germany wanted to produce the play in Munich or something, then he contacted the media and he told them that this actress, she doesn't want to go there and do this. She's the actress that said no to Hitler, and it became this big thing. And then he ended up producing his play that he wrote in like 2 days. And yeah, you can check that on his Wikipedia page, I guess. That there's amazing. A complete story there. But yeah, he was that kind of like entrepreneur that he would not back down from a challenge. He would just think outside the box and come up with some wacky way of making people, go to the theater.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing with the buzzers under the seats was the gimmick of the movie was that fear was something tangible in your body, and it would kill you unless you screamed to let it out.
Yeah, right. I've seen The Tingler, and there's a part in the movie where you see Vincent Price. I guess these movies usually have a part sometimes where they break the fourth wall.
And just talking to the audience.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, the Tingler's on the loose. He's in the theater. Scream! Scream! And people would just, hear the buzzing thing. Like every fifth seat was like rigged to buzz. It was like a war surplus buzzers or something that they bought cheap, and they would do that. You remember when we were starting Occupy Midian back in 2012? Mm-hmm. And there was this one guy who started contacting us that he said he wanted to talk to Russell and Clive Barker, and he had an idea and whatever. And he ended up talking to me for like 2 hours on Skype.
Oh, yeah, the groundswell guy.
The groundswell guy? Yeah.
Yes.
You remember that guy? I'm going to reveal a little part of the story that he was talking. His idea was, and honestly, I couldn't even talk because he wouldn't let me talk. He would just like go on this verbal diarrhea. And I was like, oh, brother. So one of his ideas was that he wanted to do a kind of a Nightbreed tour of the Cabal Cut or something. And he wanted it to be like hire like performers to be outside the theaters and create this like put some dry ice machines and make these like tombstone stuff on the outside of the theater and have the performers out like Pelican and stuff. Oh. And I was like, and then turned it into like an itinerant show. And I was like, that both sounds awesome and stupid.
Yeah.
Because he had no idea where to get the money for this. I think he was just banking on Clive Barker being a giant millionaire or Morgan Creek putting money behind this or something.
Yeah.
And he was this was his idea. Like, we'll just create that. And then he was on Twitter tweeting at Russell and Clive, remember? He was saying, the drums are beating, Median is coming. And
yes.
And then once he realized that nobody was taking him seriously, he was like, well, the drums are silent. Your loss. And I was like, this guy was so weird. And
I think he did end up talking to Russell, and Russell was kind of mad about it.
Yeah. Also, the guy was like, oh, I'm sorry that if I sounded weird. It's just that I had tremendous back pain and I was on too much medication. And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of a little weird.
Yeah.
But I didn't mention his name, so I guess that's fine. But this guy he had some really wacky ideas. And he kept talking about Clive Barker's Arabat. And I was like, okay. Did you do your homework at all? It's not Arabat, it's Abarat.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I was under medication.
Yeah, right. That's
anyway, so, yeah.
Well, and the problem is you can't just drag people off the street and make them watch Nightbreed. It's not for everybody. I mean, as much as we love the movie, it's really for, the fan base.
Yeah, which, there might be some exciting things coming. I don't know if we can talk about it, but there might be some exciting projects coming in. You have all this stuff that Nightbreed is still alive, the Cavity Colors. And I'm sorry, Cavity Colors, but what a heck of a name. Cavity Colors are doing this amazing package of products and stuff. And it's Nightbreed is still there. It's still pulling people into buying stuff and buying merchandise, and it's got a lot of potential. I would like to see more stuff happen in terms of Nightbreed out there.
Yeah.
But not what that guy was saying.
Right.
Dry ice machines and people on drums outside a theater and guys dressed up like Pelican. Unless it's a big convention or something. You know?
Exactly. You gotta bring people in that already want to see it. You can't just go, you with the blue hair, Nightbreed.
Yeah. Right. So they also talk about this fictitious director that was in this movie by Joe Dante called Matinee from 1993.
Yeah, and I had made a note about it because I thought it was a biographical movie, kind of like Ed Wood. That was my memory of it, but I completely forgotten that it's a fictitious character that's based around William Castle.
Yeah, with John Goodman playing a director called Lawrence Woolsey, I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, basically it kind of is. They just didn't use his name, but they kind of did a very close adaptation of what he was like. Like there's this, these kids are watching a movie called Ment.
Yeah.
You know, it's a giant part man, part ant, you know, and presented in a Tomovision. With buzzers on the seats, and it takes place in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there's a bunch of old timey actors here, cool cast. Like Dick Miller is in the film; he plays a protester, and I like these movies that have like a movie inside a movie, right? Mm-hmm. That people are sitting down in a theater watching a movie in a movie.
Yeah, that's cool. That
happens a lot in some movies, like the Gremlins movie, the Gremlins 2, I think.
Yeah, right.
And I think I didn't see this movie for this episode, but I've heard of it, and I know that at the end there's a big finale. The whole theater starts falling apart, and obviously that's a little over the top. But
well, and John Goodman, he's really kind of grown as an actor. I mean, we remembered him originally as the husband in Roseanne, but he's become a really good dramatic actor.
Yeah, like one of the last movies that I've heard about him doing was that movie that he did for J.J. Abrams, right?
10 Cloverfield.
10, right, exactly, yeah. So I think
that was really good.
Very well critically acclaimed, and his performance apparently was really, really good. I need to watch that movie.
I didn't really understand what 10 Cloverfield Lane had to do with the original Cloverfield, though. I mean, I don't know if you've seen either or both of those.
I've seen Cloverfield. I haven't seen 10 Cloverfield Lane yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't spoil any of it then.
Okay, yeah. So you saw it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Giant monster movie I'm in.
Yeah, of course, kaiju, right?
Yeah.
You're a big kaiju fan. So, yeah, William Castle, fantastic guy. Like I said, a lot of cool movies, Old Dark House, Mr. Sardonicus, and House on Haunted Hill. So, yeah.
Reading about these cache flag movies, it feels like almost like, well, I think that must have been in an alternate dimension because I'd never even heard of that stuff.
Right. This guy Steckler, right?
Yeah.
He made these really cheap exploitation films where he played a character called Cache Flag that had like a hood or something or a mask.
Yeah, or it was almost a pseudonym. Like that was his actor name for playing in these movies, but it wasn't always the same character. It's really strange.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those at all. I think we mentioned Cache Flag a little bit, maybe on our first episode when we were talking about A to Z of 4.
Yeah.
But I really didn't see much about that. But, hey, that's one thing that apparently is mentioned here in this book. So I guess Clive must be a fan.
So there's probably listeners out there going, you don't know Cache Flag? It's like,
well, I can't know everything.
Yeah, sorry.
Another thing I don't know comes from the word Y for year zero. And I'm a big fan of Alan Moore and Alan Moore's From Hell. I actually have the volumes right here in front of me. But I've never heard of Lord Horror or Savoy Books or David Britton. And this was interesting because this really got me researching about it. And I was like, wow, this seems pretty hardcore punk kind of thing that was banned in England because it relied heavily on Nazi imagery as a way to provoke and shock people.
Well, and they didn't make the Nazis exactly bad guys, or the main protagonist was a Nazi.
Yeah.
Like a Nazi propagandist or something, right?
Right. So there was a Lord Haw-Haw that was part of this, and I have to look more into this because I couldn't find much about this. So I had to just go by what I saw in the episode of the TV show, of H.Z.4, and what I could find as images on Google because I don't have this and I couldn't find a copy to read in time for this. But it seems pretty hardcore. I mean, the imagery inside is just tremendously complicated and tremendously shocking. And it seems like some of these creatures that appear in Lord Horror, they are very Cenobite-like in look and appearance. Yeah. A lot of horrible Holocaust stuff that is not really rooted in reality. It's more like this alternate dimension where the Nazis won. And so, I mean, this comes from David Britton. He was a British author. He founded Weird Fantasy in the 70s, and
it's not hard to see why British government wouldn't be happy about that.
Right, yeah. And also because they provoked like the police and Margaret Thatcher, and it's like they were censored under the BBC article on the Obscene Publications Act of 1857.
Yeah.
So they were the last novel to be banned under the act, actually, according to my research here. That was David Britton's Lord Horror. It was the last novel to be banned under the Obscene Publications Act. And they did stuff where they put, Margaret Thatcher being buggered and Hitler shooting up drugs with Lord Horror.
Wow.
The Savoy Books publishing house kept getting raided by the cops because of that. And then they started actually putting pictures of, characters like the police just doing horrible things in the comic book, and they were just kind of teasing, see how far they could take it,
Yeah.
So ultimately they didn't go too far. But I found a quote by Ramsey Campbell. He said that Lord Horror makes most horror fiction look tame and safe, awesomely grotesque, unstoppably imaginative, hideously funny. It's a truly dangerous book. That's Ramsey Campbell.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, and reading about that too, it was just like Cash Flag. It's like, wow, I'd never heard of this at all. I mean, and I was kind of aware of the, more risque comics, at the early 90s and late 80s and stuff, but I don't remember that at all.
Well, Clive was censored once as well, at least. Censored in terms of his art, not so much his writing, but here's one thing that I took out of Revelations, that this comes from, I think he mentions this in his essay on censorship that you can find in Shadows in Eden. But here it is. When I came out of university, I went down to London and started a theater company afresh. I also illustrated a couple of centerfolds for some S&M magazines that later got arrested by Scotland Yard for their content. I'm very proud of that. This was in the mid-'70s. And they were really something. Scotland Yard thought so too. What was interesting was they arrested my originals as well. They took them away and burned them, which I always thought was the ultimate compliment. It was real confirmation that the stuff worked and that they needed to burn it. This was part of a transcript that he did at UCLA on February of '87. And, Clive was always very vocal about the censorship in, the UK, like BBFC and the infamous case of the video nasties that I think we may have talked before here in the A to Z of horror series. He said, another time in 1991, Clive said, I used to think adults of 18 had the right to see what they liked, but the situation has changed now because of video. Video can be seen by children. Images which are difficult to contextualize or comprehend by innocent minds can be disturbing. Can we trust internal policing, the BBFC, or the police? I prefer the BBFC to be there as an arbiter rather than the police. Hellraiser lost 30 seconds to the censor. Nightbreed, a little less. The police response to video nasties was ludicrous and illogical. They misunderstood the difference between artistic communities and those who were just looking to make money. I've been in censorship panels, and these conversations just go round and round. So he said this for Film Review in November of '91. So it's interesting that at the time he seemed to have kind of a sympathetic view to the BBFC. Because the video nasty thing was just, they made a list and they said these videos are banned in England.
Yeah.
And you can't buy them, you can't sell them, you can't watch them. And it's like, that's ridiculous. Some of those movies were not that bad, It's just horror films. It's not real. Like the depiction of violence is not violent. The depiction of a murder is not a murder. It's a depiction of a murder. It's fantasy.
Whereas if you watch the news, you can actually see murder and violence.
Yeah. But violence is another artifice in fantasy. It's not inherently evil. It depends on the context that you're using violence for. Most movies that have a hero, an action hero, the action hero is super violent. Look at, how many people are killed by, the main character of Die Hard,
Right.
By Bruce Willis. How many people does he kill? But he's using violence to end violence. And, although some people say you can't fight violence with violence, that there's just, it's not real violence. It's movie violence. It's cathartic. It's meant to entertain. It's not meant to inspire, someone to go out with a gun.
When Last Action Hero came out, Arnold Schwarzenegger was talking about how, he didn't want to make such violent movies anymore, and he wanted to make ones that were more, comedy or family oriented. And then some group did a body count of all of his movies, and Last Action Hero was the highest one.
Oh my goodness!
Out of all of them, it was like over 100.
That movie was a little lame. I just didn't see Schwarzenegger be kind of like this kid movie guy.
Yeah, like Kindergarten Cop and Junior.
The one where he gets pregnant, Junior. Right. I mean, oh, God. What was he thinking? But then again, it's they worked. They made a lot of money. They became classics. I mean, I think someone out there probably thinks.
Destroyed his own career doing that stuff, too, right? Trying to switch to only kids' movies.
Yeah, Pluto Nash and that Haunted House movie, they were just terrible.
Yeah.
They were real bombs. But, so this was year 0 chapter.
Yeah. And then there's, of course, the other half was Alan Moore's From Hell, which is about Jack the Ripper, right? I mean, I've never read it or seen the movie, but...
Oh, you haven't?
No.
I really recommend it. The comic book is available from Top Shelf Publications. It's a big book. I mean, I have it in my hand right now. And this thing is at least a couple of inches thick.
Well, and they said in A to Z of Horror that there was 30 pages of it of just Jack the Ripper with this dead body, dissecting it and cutting it into little pieces.
Yes.
It's meant to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah, he does spend that much time in the comic book killing and taking apart Mary Kelly, which was the name of the prostitute that I think kind of closed the cycle of murders by Jack the Ripper. And I've seen a picture of the corpse. It is not pretty. It is not pretty. It's one of those things that I probably will never forget. I don't know why I looked it up. But I read a lot about the Ripper books, and I read this from how it was adapted in a movie with Johnny Depp.
Yes, right. And I never saw it just because, I don't know, Jack the Ripper kind of creeps me out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's fascinating, though, to try to understand why this one killer in history became so iconic, so enormous, when there's people who've killed more people than Jack the Ripper, and they didn't become famous. They didn't become, like such a myth. It was really a mix of factors, one of them, of course, being, the British press. That was, the mother of tabloids, right?
Yeah.
The British press, in a way, was kind of like the early exploitation, where you had the little urchins in the corner saying, read all about the gruesome murders that happened last night, and people just buy it and talk about it and be like, oh, look at this, the Ripper killed another one, and he ate the kidney of the victim, and he sent a letter to the Scotland Yard, and people would just, consume this as kind of their gruesome entertainment,
Yeah.
It was kind of like a Grand Guignol thing in real life, so... I guess the mystery part of it was, what kept it going. So the title From Hell actually comes from the beginning of one of the Ripper letters that he sent to the Scotland Yard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he opens the letter saying From Hell, and then he starts writing, hey, I had some kidney pie from that last hooker I killed. It was delicious. And then another time he sent an actual kidney or a part of a kidney to the police and stuff. Of course, back then, they never knew who was Jack the Ripper, although over the years there's been several books written that raised the hypothesis that it might have been this guy or that guy or even a member of the royal family. But Alan Moore made it out to be a doctor, Sir William Whitney Gull, who was actually a physician to the Queen. And that's his hypothesis, and that's what he made the story around, was William Gull, Mason. There's a lot of Masonic influences here. There's a lot of stuff that he might have done ritual killings. And then, they trace out the places and the murders and stuff and the monuments around London, and they make this inverted pentagram. And it's a pretty powerful moment when you read this comic and you come up with that idea. It's like, oh, wow, what if this was true? That's really, really creepy. But I think the movie was a little lackluster. I saw the movie, didn't think it was that interesting. I don't know. I think Johnny Depp didn't really work for me. Johnny Depp plays the inspector.
I think Alan Moore is not super invested in movie adaptations of his work anyway, right? I mean, he doesn't really want it adapted, and he doesn't care when they make a movie that much.
Right. That I was going to say that's an understatement. Yes, he actually put a curse on Watchmen when it came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was like, Alan Moore, for those who don't know, he's kind of like this half writer, half wizard kind of guy from Northampton. And he's big into magic and stuff like that. And when Watchmen came out, he was like, I put a pox on that movie. He said that in an interview, and it's
it may have worked because I don't think it was very successful, was it?
I'm not sure. Let's see how much it made in the box office.
It's kind of like Suicide Squad. It's one of those movies that everybody was really excited about until it came out, and then they're just like, eh.
Well, it says here that the budget was an estimated $35 million, and the opening weekend made $11 million in the U.S.
Okay.
And in the U.K., it made just £891,000.
Whoa.
So, of course, the international gross kind of made up for that, I guess. But, the thing with Alan Moore is that he just, all the adaptations made upon his work, he just goes like, all right, take my name off it. Take my money that you're going to give me and just give it to the other authors and the other actors or whatever. So I don't want to have anything to do with that. He explicitly puts a line between comic book medium and movies. And he doesn't believe that because of the collaborative nature of movies and producers and all that stuff, he doesn't really believe that they do a good job adapting his histories, his stories.
Or that it's even possible to adapt them.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like Watchmen, they had to throw out a lot of stuff, even considering that there's this version of Watchmen that's like 4 hours long. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to throw out a lot of backstory, a lot of other, characters in there. And they changed the ending completely for the movie. So it's not really that story anymore. So the whole point of the movie is kind of rendered a little poorly. Yeah. So I guess he wasn't happy with that. But
He did V for Vendetta also, right? I thought
yes,
that was
he wrote V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess he didn't like that movie that much either. But then again, what's new, right?
Yeah.
No, From Hell, he made it with another artist called Eddie Campbell, and it's just done in black and white ink drawings. It's not color. It's not like a comic, like a superhero comic book. Yeah. It's very. It's just. Things are a little sketchy sometimes, even. I wouldn't call it a realistic style. It's very dark, a lot of shadows, a lot of like just scratches and ink. And I just really works for me. I have that, and I have the From Hell companion book, which is another book talking about the book. And this one is 300 pages long. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff here to delve into if you guys want to get into From Hell, the comic book by Alan Moore. The movie, not so much. I mean, $35 million budget, made about $74 million worldwide. So it wasn't really that much of a hit.
Yeah.
Considering that, you have to put almost double that budget for marketing and stuff.
I was a little confused because the opening paragraphs of this chapter of the book talk all about, like, apocalypse and stuff. And it's called Y for Year Zero. But then they talk about Jack the Ripper and this, like, Nazi future. And it seems kind of like it doesn't really fit with what the subject of the chapter, I guess.
Yeah, Year Zero, that's an interesting thing. It didn't occur to me, but you're actually right. I was actually, now that you mention it, I'm trying to think, why do they call it Y0?
Yeah.
I thought they were going to go into like millennium tension, pre-millennium tension or something like that. Because they do talk about the year 2000 and all that. But
it's weird, right? I mean, what has Jack the Ripper got to do with post-apocalyptic, stories, I guess?
I guess it's because they might have been trying to make a comparison between the beginning of something new, like the burning of old idols, and the beginning of something new, I guess. And in some sense, these authors were a bit iconoclasts, where they were like Lord Horror was trying to destroy institutions by creating an alternate universe where it's like, hey, I'm going to make something so shocking that shows what, our country, certain hypocrisy in our country, like Margaret Thatcher pretending to care so much about poor people and then, cutting, minors' pensions or whatever. Or Alan Moore saying here, there's a quote from Alan Moore where he says that Margaret Thatcher thought that there should be a return to old Victorian values. And then he said he kind of wrote from hell to show people what the Victorian values were, where it was this society that was extremely repressed, like full of working class and then an aristocratic elite, and the poor working class, lived in poverty, sexually repressed. Like poor teenage boys were taken to brothels by their dads to get their first introduction to sex, and then they would get some sort of disease, and then that's something that's going to be with you for a few years, and it was just really not a good time to live. So, but yeah, I guess in a sense it is probably talking more about this sort of iconoclastic nature of these authors, not so much year zero as in the end of the world, but like the beginning of a new generation that would push the envelope a little more.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, and the next one was Z for Zombie, which started out with Memento Mori, which was in the TV series. That was in Some Other Letter, right? Where the death photography? Because we talked about that already.
Yeah, I think I remember mentioning that my brother has a painting of a guy dead sitting in a chair and stuff like that. And I think I also mentioned stuff like when baby photography, when people would put their mothers and then put like a towel over the mother and then put the kid on the lap of the mother. And then you see this woman completely covered just holding a baby. Yeah. And I remember that. We've talked about this before. So, but yes, there are things that people would do. Oftentimes it's like back in the time when pictures were not that common like nowadays. Sometimes the only time someone got photographed was after they died.
Yeah, it's like, well, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to have a picture.
Right. Yeah. They show a picture of the Parsons family. That was a family of 5 or something that was
all
murdered.
Laid out on that bed.
Yeah, it's this reminds me, and I was thinking about this back when we were talking about the other photographer. But I got this, Simon Marsden. But I have this book that I bought some time ago, and I read it. It's a beautiful book. It's by a photographer called Paul Koudounaris, and he talks about these saints and relics of saints in churches all around Europe, and corpses that are decorated with like gold and jewels and all that stuff that you can see in certain churches and crypts. He made a book about that, and he took pictures of all these like saints. And oftentimes, those saints were not really saints at all. They were just normal bodies, but the church would say, let's say that this is Saint Sebastian of whatever, and they would end up making that like, the relic business. There were like, how many toes can a saint have, And,
right, or splinters from the true cross.
Oh, and this is a rib from Saint Simon or whatever, and it's like, okay, fine, I guess. I'll take your word for it. Yeah. But they would put all this like ornate gold and jewelry stuff around it and put it in a little altar. And in Portugal, you can see something like that. I mean, in Portugal, I've been to this place that has a chapel that's completely built of bones. You can go in there and all the walls are made out of skulls, and then there's like a chandelier I guess it was a way for people to deal with death and stuff like that, and maybe think that there was beauty in death, right?
That picture of the Parsons family all laid out on that bed, I was reading that, to prepare for this episode, and I didn't realize Joey was looking at me over my shoulder. And he goes, Dad, who are those people? And I said, actually, they're all dead. Goes, what? Why are they all dead? Like,
well, you could tell them they were sleeping, but I guess,
Yeah, right. Like in Independence Day, Mommy's sleeping.
Right. So, like you said, that was sometimes the one time where they could take a picture of the person before they were buried. And in this case, the Parsons family photo, it was done so they could send it to other relatives And I'm thinking that's not a good thing to send someone.
That was one of those things where the husband went crazy, right, and killed all of them?
No, I think they were killed by someone else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
I can't remember.
It says here somewhere where the name of the guy who killed him. 5 members of one family who were killed by a Mr. Hamilton.
Oh, so, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But, there's pictures like that for certain American figures. I think there's one of those for like one of those gunfighters of the West. Mm-hmm. I forgot the name of him now, but I do remember there was one photo taken of some gunfighter that, it's shows up a lot in Cowboys and Indians kind of story.
Like Buffalo Bill or Billy the Kid or one of those.
It might have been Billy the Kid, but there's a picture of him and he's dead. It's just the one picture they took before they buried him.
Oh, wow.
But so this one goes more into zombies. So zombies and why they're scary. Why do you think zombies are scary?
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting that especially the discussion about afterlife. It's like, everybody wants the afterlife. Everybody's excited about. Everybody wants immortality. They want to live forever after they die. It's like, what happens if this is what you get when you die? This is your afterlife. You become this like mindless monster.
Or what happens when hell is full and the dead will walk the earth?
Yeah, right, yeah. But in the original black and white, it's interesting. In the original black and white Night of the Living Dead, there was a Venus probe that had gone out, and on its way back to Earth, they discovered that it was full of this weird radiation, so they shot it down. And then the radiation went across America, and that's what started the plague of the dead coming back to life.
So that whole backstory, I think it's played out in the news broadcast, right? While they're watching TV?
Yes, exactly. And talking to government officials and stuff like that. And then, but then all that stuff gets dropped when they get to Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. It's like when people say, "Why is this happening?" They're like, "I don't know. Any explanation is as good as any other one."
Yeah. My favorite part in that movie, I think, is when there's the anchorman.
Yeah.
He's reporting that the dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims. Yeah. It's hard to believe, but that's what that seems to be what's going on. And I'm like, oh wow, that became like such a cool trailer line for Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, it's a cool movie, but watching it now, I kind of realize that I still prefer the Tom Savini version, the 1990 remake.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little gorier, and it's a lot more colorful, obviously, because this one's in black and white, but also it's got Patricia Tallman playing Barbara, so you've got a more sort of kick-ass version of Barbara, and then Tony Todd playing Ben. Which is also really cool.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the zombie is scary because I think he's just relentless.
Yeah.
And nowadays, of course, there's 2 kinds of zombies. There's a slow zombie and there's a running zombie.
Right.
Which I think kind of became a thing after 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
But
although
for me,
they were a lot in Night of the Living Dead. This old version, they didn't really know how to be zombies. So some of them were running, and some of them were, grabbing things and waving their arms around, and it was not as set in stone like it was by the time they made the sequel, Dawn of the Dead. And
in this movie, they weren't really called zombies at all, right? They're just ghouls. I think they're just supposed to be ghouls, ghoulish people.
That's a George Romero thing. Nobody ever says the word zombie, except for one time in Dawn of the Dead. One of the characters says there's going to be 1,000 zombies in here.
Oh, I see. So yeah, I think that the thing that makes a zombie most scary, and I'm talking about slow zombies because they're the classic zombie, is not when you have one zombie following you. I mean, ultimately, you can argue that Michael Myers is kind of a zombie, and people seem to run away from him all the time while he's just walking, and he seems to find them a little further up ahead all the time.
Well, and Jason does that too, and you kind of wonder, well, are they teleporting? How are they doing that? Or they're running as fast as they can, and then they look back and they're not there, and then they're standing in front of them.
But the thing that really scares people about zombies is that it's when you have a horde, right? When you have a horde
Yeah.
And when it's something that spreads throughout the entire world, then there's nowhere to run because they'll find you and they'll get you and they'll finally surround you and tear you to pieces like poor Captain, that Captain on Day of the Dead.
Right.
Like joke on them.
Yeah.
It's like that's the thing that you can't reason with a zombie.
Yeah.
You can't stop him. He's already dead. You can't kill him. He just keeps coming. And that's, I think, what, especially when there's lots of them, that's what, really makes it scary.
Yeah. Me. And it's like the fear of, they're kind of also about the fear of impending death, Death is personified in these creatures coming at you. You can't escape death.
And also because when they turn, they become completely limited to their reptile brain. So the person that you knew is not going to be there anymore. Like the little girl that gets bit, and then she ends up killing her father, and then she kills her mother. Yeah. And it's like, if your brother turned into a zombie and he would wake up and rise back from the dead, you couldn't say, "Oh, that's still my brother." Yeah. But you would see him as your brother, and he'd be trying to kill you, and that's horrible, right? That's the thing where if you know the person that's a zombie, that's even worse. And they do that a lot in these movies. They did that in Night of the Living Dead. They did that in that the one that's done by that guy, the remake that they did for I think Day of the Dead. No, it's not Day of the Dead. It's the one where they're locked in a shopping mall.
That's Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead. Thank you.
That's the sequel to Night of the Living Dead.
The remake of Dawn of the Dead has this interesting twist, which is this one guy has a girlfriend and she's pregnant, and then she's bit and she dies, comes back as a zombie, and then she's still pregnant, and then the baby is also a zombie. Yeah. So, holy crap, that's a real mess right there. I think it was a Zack Snyder movie. I think.
Yeah, I didn't like. People like that one, but I didn't like it. It's just too different.
Sure. The special effects are better, but then it's like they're supposed to be in Milwaukee, and then they get on a boat to go somewhere, and they find this island that has palm trees, and it's like, where are you going? There's no island with palm trees in Wisconsin. At best you can be going in the lake, Yeah. But anyway, so here's a funny thing. John Russo co-wrote the script for Night of the Living Dead with George Romero. Later, he wanted to make a sequel called Return of the Living Dead. So the thing is that Russo retained the rights to the Living Dead title, and Romero would go on to use the of the Dead in his films, right? So Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead. Yeah. So Russo was making a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, but then he teamed up with Dan O'Bannon, and he decided to go another way. And that's when we got Return of the Living Dead.
And that always bugged me, because it's like, you just made a sequel to a movie that already has a sequel.
Yeah. But, and then they made that movie, Night of the Living Dead, is a actual movie in the universe of Return of the Living Dead.
Yes.
It's just a movie made on this military experiment with this toxic stuff or whatever. And then they say, oh, this movie was based on that event that happened.
Yeah, right. They're like, oh, no, that stuff actually happened. This is real. But then they go to shoot them in the head, and it doesn't do anything because they're not like the zombies in Night of the Living Dead. Yeah. So, but I like that movie better than Night of the Living Dead, to be honest. Well, I don't.
I love that movie. Just that whole scene with the bag full of moving parts, and they say, oh, it's just ferrets with rabies or whatever. It's like, just stick them in the cremation. Just stick them in the crematorium. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to shoot them first. And then it's like, well, you can't open the bag. And that whole thing of, and then, the punks and,
right.
Linnea Quigley doing the dance on top of the grave and all that stuff. And then, I don't know. I just find it so trashy but so fun to watch. It's a different kind of movie, right? It's not a tension movie like Night of the Living Dead.
No.
But Night of the Living Dead has this ending that's kind of anticlimactic, and you feel like, oh, really? This is the ending? Oh. You kind of feel like he survived, he made it through the night.
Yeah.
And then, he just he gets shot by a posse of guys who are out there killing zombies, and they think he's a zombie.
Yeah, he was even pointing a gun at them. You know, and aiming through the sights. You'd think that they would be able to see that that's not a zombie. They don't do that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the crow is kind of a zombie, right?
Yeah, well, I guess that's what they're trying to say by sticking that on the end of this chapter. I don't know. I don't know how much I agree with that. I mean, I think that he's sort of in between a ghost and a zombie, I guess.
I think that's a good description of it. I think, yeah, he's more like he's rising for revenge. He's not risen through any supernatural means or just to be a mindless drone. So he's really coming back for a mission.
Yeah, I mean, when he gets shot, he bleeds, or when he gets hurt, he bleeds, but then it heals back up again, like Wolverine. Actually,
so
different
it's kind of like
Wolverine.
a superhero.
Yeah, in the movie, like the blood sort of fades, it disappears too.
Yeah, and he's he doesn't spit out the bullets, but the bullets come out or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got superhuman strength. And
yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, you guys can read The Crow 2037 by Rob Zombie that he wrote back in '97.
Yeah.
It'll be in the show notes. So I think I've said pretty much all I have to say about The Crow, to be honest.
I watched this again, in preparation for this episode, but it's like, yeah, I've seen that movie so many times, and we already kind of talked about it. The one thing I did notice, and I don't remember if we talked about it before, was I saw James O'Barr was a looter. After a building catches on fire and what's his name, the Ghostbuster cop is pointing the gun at the Crow,
Ernie Hudson.
Ernie Hudson, is pointing the gun at Brandon Lee's character, the Crow, and then behind him there's these people. A building explodes and people are like looting it, and one of those looters was James O'Barr. Oh,
okay, yeah. I think, you mentioned that. I remember you mentioning that before, yeah.
Oh, did I?
So
this was the first time I noticed it, I think.
Oh, I thought you mentioned that before. I could swear I've heard about it.
Yeah, it seemed maybe somebody else said that to us. I can't remember.
Well, here's a quote from Clive Barker about zombies. Zombies are about dealing with death. They represent a specific face of death. And the fact that we can even talk like this about a horror movie creation puts down the theory that the genre can't be taken seriously. I agree. Yeah.
And when they made this book and TV series, they had no idea how popular zombies were going to get.
Right. And the thing about zombies as well is that when people die and we bury them, we just remember them in life rather than in death. Nobody likes to be at a funeral and then just, look at the body. It's like that's not the person that you loved anymore. It's just a husk.
Yeah.
The thing is, when the zombie comes back and it's decaying, it becomes even more gruesome and horrible. It becomes even more horrifying.
It's almost like no, you can't escape your grief. We're going to put it right in your face, trying to kill you.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but hey, lots of good suggestions by Clive Barker in this book. Lots of cool stuff that I guess if you're a teenager, if you're someone who never really got that much into horror, this is a good introduction. You can get yourself directed to a lot of good stuff in this book. So,
and there was a trade paperback of the book too, so you can get it pretty cheap if you try. If you just look on Amazon, used.
Oh, yeah. I bought my hardcover copy used for like $0.01.
Oh, even wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a good deal.
Yeah. It's not in perfect condition, obviously. The dust jacket is a little like used and a little torn here and there. But, hey, for a work copy, it's pretty cheap. So I really recommend this. And go check out our playlist where we have the whole TV show for you to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and on Z for Zombie on the TV series, there was a DJ, right? And it was like a call-in show where people would just talk about death.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So what did you think of that?
It was weird. I don't think they ever really said whether that was real or if it was just sort of staged for the show.
I've never heard anything like that on the radio before. I mean, that's probably like, I never really heard of like that coast to coast show or anything because I just don't really take that thing very seriously.
Oh, yeah.
But I do remember one time, and this doesn't really have to do with zombies, but it has to do with aliens. I was in Portugal, and I was listening to this radio called TSF, and it was the night when TV was playing that alien autopsy video that kind of made the rounds through TV. Remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
There's the alien autopsy video, and they had a panel and everything. And on the radio, they were doing kind of like a live show that night about the broadcast of the alien autopsy. And I remember there was this one guy who kept calling the same station at least 2 times, maybe 3, I forgot. But he started out being serious and said, yes, I want to talk about something that happened to me. It was really weird. And I was in this place and I saw this light and all this. And I was like, and then he said something like, and then, the aliens came out and they asked me if I forgot what he said, but it was like a joke, like a political joke. And it just started laughing, and they just cut the call, and they were like, okay, let's take another call. Thank you so much for that moment. And then a couple of calls later, they got a different name, and it was the same guy. And you could recognize the voice, and he was just starting to do another thing like that. And they were like, all right. Well, if we just want you guys to call if you have a serious story you want to talk about. Otherwise, just don't call us. And that was the one time where I was like, hey, I was listening to the radio, and I heard this stuff, and it's like the first time I've ever heard people calling in with UFO stories.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I mean, it seems like that you see that stuff more in movies than actually in real life, but then I haven't listened to the radio in years, so I don't know.
Yeah. But sometimes you hear funny stories about zombies, especially coming from Africa. Of course, the zombie started in Haiti, right?
Right.
It's kind of like the voodoo culture, and I'm not going to get too much into that because I'm not that familiar with it. But so the word was kind of appropriated for the movie zombies when they're really just ghouls. But you see that with Bela Lugosi called White Zombie, and that movie is actually with zombies. It takes place in like a plantation, and there's all this like mystery going on, and Bela Lugosi plays this hypnotic kind of guy. So I love that.
Yeah, it wasn't until George Romero that zombies started biting or trying to eat people. I think before that they were just used as slaves or. Right.
Yeah. They were mostly that. But sometimes you'll find news like some rapper in Africa that people thought he was dead, and they said, oh, this guy died like a couple years ago, and now he came back, and he's saying that he was being kept like a zombie, and he came back from the dead and stuff like that. This stuff still shows up in the news sometimes.
Wow.
And I'll see if I can find that bit of news and put it on the show notes because it's a really fascinating article.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's a funny bit of trivia. So what else is on the website?
Well, coming up next, we're going to be talking about the Nightbreed comics, and eventually we'll be talking about the book Sacrament. So if you want to follow along with us, get out the Marvel Epic Nightbreed run of comic books, because that'll be our next series that we're going to be talking about. And we got on the website, check out you and I, actually mostly you, Jose, you wrote a nice remembering Simon Says article, and I put some memories in there too.
That was too bad. Unfortunately, the artist Simon Says that you might recognize from being the guy who designed the Lament configuration box for Hellraiser, as well as part of the design of the Peliquin makeup on Nightbreed and the Decker mask. Unfortunately, he passed away after a long battle with cancer. So we made a post on the 20th of June called Remembering Simon Says, and I urge you to go read it and go listen to the episode that we did with him back in episode 116.
Yeah. He was a great guy. We got a little bit of time to talk to him, which was good. I mean, I think he also really fought hard against cancer because I remember he had said on our episode, was this a year ago? He had said I hope I can make it 2 more weeks. So, he was kind of joking, but his cancer was really serious. He said, I hope I can make it 2 more weeks so I can get that pint that Peter Atkins owes me.
Yeah.
But then he lived for a whole, a year and a month after that.
That's right. Yeah. I guess, he went through a lot of chemotherapy cycles. At one point, he was kind of half joking that he probably already beat the world record for that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, these things, once they get in your lungs, it's pretty much terminal.
Yeah.
Unless you can get like some drastic thing like a lung transplant or something. But even then, it's not. So, yeah, unfortunately, Simon Says is no longer with us, but his work will live on. And like I suggested in my Facebook post about it, if you want to help, probably do a charitable donation to your cancer-fighting charity of choice.
Yeah, and in that same vein, Rob, did he put a scene of the week on our website that was also it was his scene in one of his Simon Says's interviews on the Leviathan documentary.
Yeah, that's right. He posted it on the 23rd of June, and he wanted to pay a tribute to Simon Says. So you can go there and see his segment, Toy Maker, with Simon Says from the Leviathan documentary, where he explains a little bit about the different hidden configurations in the box, like the crouching man, the beautiful woman, Frank Cotton's face, all that stuff. Very, very cool.
Yeah, yeah. And and Rob, I think you knew about it a little bit ahead of me, but Rob did an interview, a written interview with the actor Pat Skipper, who was Rimmer, right?
Carducci.
Not Rimmer. Carducci, that's right, in Hellraiser Bloodline.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of those space cops that got killed by the Cenobites.
Right. So, like you said, he played Carducci, and he found him on Facebook. Rob found him on Facebook, I think, and he got in touch with him. And I think he accepted to answer a few questions about Bloodline. So go read it. It's a good article. It's really fun. It's going to be probably included in our Bloodline documentary that will come out. And, so he gives his impressions about how he prepared, that he went to the enormous Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard to see the premiere, where he says there were probably about 12 people in the whole place.
Yeah.
He's very candid, very open, very honest about his role in Bloodline, and seems like he didn't really think that the movie was very good.
Yeah, it's weird. He talks about how he loves it, but it's kind of like in the same way that you like corny movies.
I guess, Sometimes you wonder about some of these supporting characters in movies. Like, there's got to be someone out there who was like one of the zombies in Night of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. There's got to be someone there who's still alive. I wonder what they tell their friends. Like, hey, I was in that movie. I was this one zombie in this one scene. In this case, this guy, all he did was, do a few sarcastic, like half a dozen lines, and then gets his head chopped off by Angelique.
Yeah. Well, during the Occupy Midian cycle, I was at one of the monster one of those conventions, and I got to meet Russo. Is it John Russo? I think, and the guy who played the captain, the police captain.
Oh, right. Okay.
Another one for the fire. So they both signed my Night of the Living Dead DVD, and he wrote the police chief underneath, just in case you don't know who
that's very cool. Yeah. So wonderful. Those people nowadays, you probably find them on conventions and doing like autograph appearances and stuff like that. So good for them. These movies become classics, and then the fans want to get a chance to take a picture with them and say, hey, I met this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing that we've been working on, YouTube in general. First of all, I've added a lot more episodes, so we're up to like episode 46 or something like that. That working backwards from the most current episode. So like this one is 146. So I'm all the way down. I've apparently added 100 episodes in, and we've been. I guess this doesn't really apply to our listeners, but I've been getting a little bummed out by the comments that we get from people. I just kind of hate YouTube comments, but there's people that are like, "Oh, I could care less what these idiots think." I thought this was going to be, Clive Barker's commentary of the Midnight Meat Train.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
It's like, well, you're going to the Clive Barker podcast channel, and we've got show notes right there that explain exactly what it is that you're listening to or whatever. And
it's not worth getting upset. You know, the YouTube comments are infamous for that, and so you know, a lot of people, even people who live off of YouTube, sometimes they don't really watch their comments.
There's a bunch of moochers on that are commenting because they're like, oh, well, like one guy, one of them, we did a little sample of Lido Velasco's soundtrack. And there was one guy that you know, and then Lido comes on there and goes, thanks for sharing this, guys. And then this other guy goes, hey, where can I get this? And Lido goes, oh, you can. It's available on iTunes. You can buy it. And he goes, no, I for free. And,
yeah, right.
And Lido's like, I can't believe you're asking me that.
Right. The guy probably doesn't even realize that he's talking to the composer. It's just, you know. Yeah. It's just a way of like, hey, where can I get some free stuff? You know? Yeah. So that's not our department.
Yeah, and one of those guys, I checked out his profile, and he'd assembled all of these playlists of audiobooks, you know, that people had put on YouTube so that he could just not have to pay for them, apparently.
Right. Well, you know, like I said, don't worry too much about the YouTube comments. Actually, we could probably like, you know, when you upload a video, you can actually choose not to allow comments,
really?
Disable comments.
Oh, yeah. I had no idea.
Yeah, you can choose to disable comments on any video.
I wish you could just delete some comments like Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
You can either just mark them as spam or not, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, on YouTube, you can also delete them if you want. But, you know.
Can? Huh.
Yeah. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're putting it up on YouTube. And if you're someone who doesn't want to go on iTunes, or you don't want to install it, or you think it's too much of a hassle to download the files so you can listen to them, you can just go on YouTube, just play the video, and you know you'll be listening to our episodes in no time.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of season 2, which is 2013. So we'll get that one done, and then the first one, and that'll be it. They'll be all finished. All the audio commentaries are on there. One of them, YouTube thought we were pirating, you know, an audio commentary from the actual Blu-ray or whatever, so they flagged it. We contested that. So yeah, they did a strike, but it took like 3 days, but we got it back again.
It should be okay. We're not doing anything that's illegal, so. Right. So guys, go check out YouTube. Brian's been doing a heck of a job along with putting it up on Libsyn. And you can make your playlist of episodes and go on our YouTube channel because there's more cool stuff there too. You can see Clive Barker talking about some things, and you know, you can see unboxing videos of some of the luxury editions that we've been lucky enough to receive.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. One guy got mad at your Leviathan unboxing video because he thought it was going to be the whole Leviathan documentary.
Oh, I see.
Like, that's an 11-hour movie, and you thought that this 2-minute movie was going to be the same thing.
Well, you know, you can't fix stupid. So.
But the other thing we are working on is some kind of general videos about because some people just listen on their phones or whatever, but some general videos about how to subscribe, or you know what's going on our website and what we have on there, and kind of putting those together. And I did one for the iPhone and one for our app, you know, for our app on iPhone, and for subscribing on the podcast app, and one for subscribing through the computer using iTunes if you have a Mac.
That's pretty cool. So yeah, again, reminding our listeners that we do have an app on the Android ecosystem. You look up BarkerCast, so you should find the app for the Clive Barker podcast on Android. They're free. You can also find it on the iTunes store.
Yeah.
And they both have different icons, I think. The one on the iTunes store has Pelican, and the one on the Android market has Pinhead.
Yeah, which we thought was kind of a cool way to differentiate them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. You can find the show notes for this episode, as well as lots of news and features, at www.clivebarkercast.com. Leave comments there, or get them directly into the podcast by clicking the Send Voicemail tab on the right. Please follow us on Twitter at BarkerCast or at Occupy Midian. Like us on Facebook and join the Occupy Midian Facebook group. You can listen on the site or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, TuneIn, Pocket Cast, Google Play, and Double Twist. Look for our apps in the iTunes Store or Google Play Store. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Please take a couple of minutes to leave us a review on iTunes. It means the world to us and helps us spread the word about Clive Barker. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.